thesis of the night up, J.D. Carter with his entitled Turnover a New Leaf, Increasing CPS Caseworkers to Reduce Caseloads and Turnover Rates. Let's give him a hand.
On March 12, 2016, Quezada, the mother of a 4-year-old named Liliana, decided to leave her daughter under the supervision of her boyfriend. Liliana had been vomiting all day with a stomach virus, and Quezada had left to grab lunch because she was sick of taking care of her, as she told jurors during her testimony. When she returned to her home in Grand Prairie, where her boyfriend, Pfeiffer, was taking care of her daughter and her 18-month-old son, Liliana was nowhere to be found. After shooting heroin, Quezada finally asked her boyfriend where Liliana was. Pfeiffer led her into the living room, opened the closet door, and revealed her daughter, strung up to a rod, bending at the waist, with her hands tied behind her back by electric wire. She had taken a sip of her brother's juice, and this was her punishment. After the girl was untied, the indifferent mother left the room to make her daughter a peanut butter sandwich. When Liliana, who, keep in mind, was sick with a stomach virus, refused to eat the sandwich, the boyfriend slipped on black gloves and forced the sandwich with Pedialyte down the 4-year-old's throat. After throwing up once again, the mother and the boyfriend grabbed a belt and a bamboo stick and beat the girl till she was almost unconscious. Angered that the girl would not stop throwing up, Pfeiffer grabbed her by the throat and threw her into the side of the closet wall, leaving a dent, as a later police report would describe. Quezada then took her daughter, covered in vomit, and dropped her into the bathtub, leaving her once again under the supervision of her boyfriend. As she left the room to grab a change of clothes, she heard loud bangs against the wall of the bathroom, all the while her boyfriend screaming at her daughter. When Liliana had stopped breathing, the couple proceeded to call 911, claiming that the 4-year-old's injuries had been self-inflicted. She died before the ambulance had a chance to show up. 36 days before the death of Liliana, her grandparents had called CPS reporting signs of abuse. Under Texas law, the situation should have been investigated within 24 hours. However, after 36 days, no investigator had visited to see if these allegations were true. Liliana's death was the outcome. However, there was an underlying problem. The investigator who was supposed to check on Liliana was more than just busy. He was given 70 cases by the Texas Child Protective Services, 58 more than the national average. Before going any further, let me explain what the Child Protective Service is, also known as CPS, and how the foster care system operates. CPS is a government-funded agency, the purpose of which is to protect children in America. This involves responding to reports of abuse or neglect, and, if need be, removing a child and placing them into the foster care system. There are many types of caseworkers who play different roles in this process, but the two that I will focus on are investigators and conservatorship workers. The investigator is the first responder to a report or to an allegation involving a child who has been abused or neglected. The investigator first assesses the situation and, if need be, removes a child from their home. After the initial assessment, the investigator continues interviewing parents, extended family, friends, and anyone else who can supply information about the case. If an investigator removes a child from their home, the child is immediately placed into the hands of a conservatorship worker, the second caseworker I will be dealing with. Their first job is to first find a temporary place for the child to stay. Once this is done, they immediately begin to look for a permanent solution for that child. Sometimes this is a short process, and the child is quickly reunited with their parents. However, this is not the case for the majority of those in the foster care system. On average, in Texas, a child will stay in foster care for 22 months. During this time, the CVS worker is conducting home studies, updating all parties involved with necessary information, participating in court hearings, visiting the child at least once a month, ensuring all of their physical needs are being met by the temporary home, and above all, searching for a permanent placement for that child. This is a long and complicated process, and in recent decades, the shortcomings of the Texas foster care system have been widely known. However, over the past 2 years, the Texas state government has made efforts to fix the problems in CPS and foster care. In 2016, 550 caseworkers were added to the CPS staff, increasing the number to 6,000. This was a much-needed improvement. However, stories similar to that of Liliana's still occur. With almost 30,000 children in the hands of the Texas foster care system, something must change. I am proposing that the number of investigators and caseworkers, or conservatorship caseworkers, be increased by 1,100, or 550 each, at a cost of $50 million. By adding these new caseworkers, many problems will be addressed. First, the average caseload for each caseworker will decrease. Second, as a result in reduced caseloads, the turnover rate will decrease as well. Lastly, as a result of reduced caseloads and turnover rates, many of the 30,000 children in the Texas foster care system will better receive the care and attention that they deserve. By adding the new caseworkers to the CPS staff, specifically conservatorship workers and investigators, the average caseload will decrease. Since investigators are the first to respond to a report or to an allegation involving a child being abused, one would think that these caseworkers would have ample time to investigate each situation, considering it could be life or death. However, this is far from reality. Investigators are plagued with high caseloads, prohibiting them from spending necessary time with each victim. The average caseload for an investigator in Texas is about 17 cases, 5 more than the national recommended average of 12. Similar to that of investigators, the job of the conservatorship worker is vital for the well-being of every child in the foster care system. CVS workers are responsible for determining the best possible home for each child, greatly affecting their entire future. As of right now, in Texas, a CVS worker has an average caseload of about 28 cases. The national recommended average is 17. These recommended averages were determined by the Child Welfare League Association, who after many nationwide studies determined that high caseloads lead to low job satisfaction, burnout, and worse outcomes for children in the foster care. While there are some states in the U.S. who struggle in this area, like Texas, there are actually many states in the U.S. who have caseloads below the national recommended average. States such as Delaware, Pennsylvania, and Illinois all at one point struggled, but now have caseloads lower than the recommended average. Each of these states attributes this decrease to an increase in full-time employees, not a decrease in cases. In 1998, Delaware CVS workers faced an average caseload of about 26 cases, and they appealed to the Delaware state legislature to hire more workers. The state then passed legislation ensuring sufficient funding for caseloads to be near the national recommended average. Since then, the caseload in Delaware has dropped to 13 cases, 4 below the recommended average for conservatorship workers. When comparing the Delaware child welfare system to Texas, the stats are staggering. In 2017, 75% of children placed in the foster care system in Delaware were removed within the first year. In Texas, only 40% of children were removed within the first year. Another staggering statistic is that in Texas, 17% of children who were reunited with their original family were re-abused. The re-abuse of a child indicates that the conservatorship worker did not spend sufficient time ensuring that the original home was safe enough for the child to re-enter. In Delaware, the reoccurrence of maltreatment is only 6%. High caseloads do not only affect the well-being of the workers, but the children as well. As I mentioned earlier, when 550 caseworkers were added to the CPS staff in 2016, immense progress was made. The investigator caseload dropped by about 3 cases and by about 4 cases for CVS workers. With double the employees added this year than in 2016, the caseload for investigators should drop from about 17 cases to 13, very close to the national recommended average. The average caseload for CVS workers should drop to a much more manageable caseload from 28 to 22 cases, again, very close to the national recommended average. By increasing the number of CPS employees, caseloads will decrease. Increasing the number of CPS employees through government funding will not only reduce caseloads, but the turnover rate will be reduced as well. Excuse me, one sec. In a meta-analysis which pulls from 22 different sources, the number one reason that CPS employees cited for quitting their jobs was from stress and emotional exhaustion from high caseloads. As you can imagine, high caseloads take a toll on the caseworker, as is clearly revealed in the turnover rate of CPS employees. For investigators, the turnover rate is 26%. For CVS workers, it's 16%. And on average, for all other jobs in America, the average turnover rate is only 4%. Whenever a caseworker quits their job, the dropped cases must then be taken by the other caseworkers, adding to their already unmanageable caseload. This begins a vicious cycle where more and more caseworkers continue to quit from high stress and long hours, leading to worse outcomes for children in the foster care system. The effect that high turnover rates have on children will be addressed later, but the CPS is also at an immense monetary disadvantage when turnover rates are high. Even though the average salary for a CPS worker is $45,000, every time an employee quits, the overall cost is $54,000. Paying overtime, training new employees, processing changes in placement, and increased time in the foster care are all added expenditures that the CPS must take into consideration when turnover rates are high. In Delaware, where caseloads are low, the turnover rate is merely 11%. And in New Jersey, where the caseloads are about 14 on average, the turnover rate is only 7%. It is clear that by increasing CPS workers, the caseload will decrease, and as a result, the turnover rate will decrease. Looking back to 2016, we can see the impact that a minimal increase in caseworkers had on turnover rates. Through many interviews with different CPS employees, it was clear that this small change helped boost morale and relieve stress, dropping turnover rates significantly. For investigators, the turnover rate dropped from about 33% to what is now 26%, and for CVS workers, from 23% to 16%. If the average turnover rate for caseworkers dropped by 7% when only 550 caseworkers were added, it is exciting to think what the outcomes could be if 1,100 new CPS workers were added. With caseloads reduced to record low numbers, the turnover rates will decrease. Hiring more caseworkers will not only be a huge benefit to the CPS staff, but will be a huge benefit to the 30,000 children in the Texas foster care system as well. This is the main goal of this proposal, to better the lives of children in our foster care system. When staff turnover rates are high, worker-family contact is sparse, and maltreatment reoccurrences, time to permanency, and reentry rates all increase drastically. To start, 94% of youths who have been 94% of youths who have been in the foster care system for more than 2 years will have at some point received mental health care. And also, it has also been proven that the longer a child stays in the foster care system, the higher chances they have of being arrested, dropping out of high school, experiencing depression or anxiety, performing poorly in school, and also using medication for a psychological impairment. If a child is in the foster care system for a prolonged period of time, the chances of them moving to a different home also increases. 35% of children who were in the foster care system for just 1 year were moved to a different home 3 times, and 66% of children who were in the foster care system for 2 years were moved at least 3 times or more. The more times a child has to move, the less likely they are to ever find a permanent home. Many of these problems directly stem from an inadequate CPS agency and the constant movement and attrition of workers. Even with just a small increase of caseworkers in 2016, the outcomes for foster children greatly improved. In 2017, just 1 year later, 1,000 more children reached permanency than the 2 years before. That's 1,000 lives changed for the better. If the outcomes of adding twice as many CPS workers this year comes even close to that, then it would be a success. Another problem that must be addressed is the investigation process and helping the children not yet in the foster care system. In 2016, whenever a child was in imminent danger of being abused, otherwise known as a Priority 1 case, 1 in 4 children were not seen within the first 24 hours, the time required by Texas state law. This was unacceptable, and some children, like Liliana, were not seen for weeks. However, after the new employees were added to the investigator staff in 2016, these numbers improved drastically. Only 1 in 10 children were not seen within the first 24 hours, a decrease of 13%, and the best it had been in years. But still, throughout the year of 2017, 3,500 Priority 1 cases were not dealt with in a timely manner. That's 10 children every single day who were left at the mercy of those who had abused them. And as bad as that may sound, that is not even the most haunting statistic. Last year, 172 children died from abuse-related reasons. Even more shocking was that for over half of those children who died from abuse, CPS have been contacted. Whether this is from investigators not reaching the scene on time or having to rush through investigations due to high caseloads, something must change. While there's no way to predict how this proposal will affect the Priority 1 cases seen in a timely manner, but the numbers will undoubtedly increase. If 13 more children out of every 100 were seen within the first 24 hours when just 550 caseworkers were added, it is encouraging to think how these numbers could change if 1,100 CPS employees were added. If just 1 more child a day was protected from abuse by this legislative change, then it would be a success. The statistics provide overwhelming evidence that by increasing the number of CPS employees, the lives of countless children in the Texas foster care system will be benefited. However, while no one will argue that helping children is a bad thing, the real problem lies in the CPS budget and where the money to hire 1,100 CPS employees will come from. Both investigators and conservatorship workers start with an average salary of $45,000. If 550 CVS workers and investigators were to be hired, the total cost would come out to about $50 million. Coming up with $50 million is a pressing task that the Texas state government would have to deal with, and it seems that government programs are already lacking money. However, after extensive research, this task may not be as daunting as at first glance. On a 2018 report done by the Texas Comptroller, they said that there were 170 programs in Texas that the Texas legislature considered to be required to not receive any appropriations. That means that according to the Texas legislature, these programs are required to receive $0 in funds and should only receive money if it cannot be better used elsewhere. After looking to the expenditures for these programs, many of them were unnecessary. For example, $10 million was spent in training new real estate agents. If each of these programs were to just reduce their spending by 30%, because as a total they cost $166 million, if it was just reduced by 30%, there would be enough money to hire the 1,100 CPS workers. While real estate agents are obviously important, the importance simply cannot compare to the safety of children in our Texas foster care system. Keep in mind, these are your own tax dollars. Would you rather this money go to programs that don't require receiving any funds or bettering and saving the lives of children in our state? Now, say the extra $50 million is added to the CPS budget, one still might argue that this money could be better used elsewhere. One proposition is that instead of trying to fix the foster care system, we should try to fix the problems that put children into the foster care system. This would involve funding local community organizations that would help parents better learn how to take care of their children before it's too late. This would involve, these organizations would help with drug and alcohol addiction and would teach classes to parents on how to better provide for the physical, mental, and emotional needs of their children. People argue that fixing the foster care system is merely putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole, and that the foster care will never be fixed if children from the same underdeveloped communities continue to flow into the system. While I completely agree with this concept and hope that these issues are addressed in the near future, there are very real problems right now that must be addressed within the foster care system. When children are being abused and neglected and nothing is being done about it, addressing that must be our first priority. Before we can take on the problems that are behind the scenes and part of the bigger picture, we must take on the problems that are staring us in the face right now. 30,000 children in the Texas foster care system, 65,000 children abused, and almost 200 dying as a result in just 1 year. These are not merely statistics, but behind each number is a real child in a real situation, like Liliana, experiencing real suffering. Although they are from broken homes, their intrinsic value is found in the fact that they, just like us, were created in the image of God. As a group of Christians, we must remember the task that has been given to us, care for the widow, for the orphan. We may not have millions of dollars, but we can be a light to the children in need in Austin who are in the Texas foster care system. There are countless organizations across the city of Austin whose sole purpose is to help these children in any way possible. Whether it's tutoring, counseling, helping at a local neighborhood sports camp, or even just volunteering to give a ride to school, these are all ways that we as Christians can make an impact in the lives of those in the Texas foster care system. More than anything, these children need to know the love of Christ, and no amount of government funding can provide that. Thank you. Can I grab my water right here? Oh. Thanks. Torch, take this up.
All right. On JD's panel, we have Brooke White, who is a licensed clinical social worker and licensed chemical dependency counselor, who has previously managed clinical programs in adult drug and alcohol inpatient treatment. She has worked as the director of LifeWorks Emergency Shelter for runaway and homeless youth and youth in the foster care system previously and currently holds the position of the director of evidence-based programming at LifeWorks, which serves transition-aged youth experiencing homelessness and other barriers by providing housing, workforce, education, and counseling support. We also have Crystal Smith, who is the founder and CEO of Foster Village, Inc., a nonprofit organization that provides support to children in foster care and those caring for them, with 5 locations nationwide. Crystal has a background in child development, parent education, and has served as a trusted child welfare advocate at the Capitol and through multiple print and media publications. Standing in for JD's advisor is Ms. Catherine Ball, who is a member of the Thesis team, and she asks really good questions. And then we also have Graham Donaldson, who never knew his parents and wasn't. No, I'm just kidding. He's fine. He knows it. Okay. Well, no, he's fine. He's fine. Oh yeah, paddles. So if you're new to the if you're new to the panel, in front of you you have a paddle. If you show me the white side, it means you have a new question. If you show me the red, it means you have a follow-up question. You get priority. So the floor is open. Catherine.
Great job, JD.
Thank you.
You mentioned at the end sort of a call to action to us as Christians of how we can help with this problem. And I was wondering if you had some thoughts on what the role of, or how the role of the church differs from the role of, say, CPS in this particular case.
That's a very good question. Well, one thing is my father is the pastor of the Austin Stone, so I can always give him a call. But in all seriousness, CPS caseworkers, they can only go so far. Like I said, they have a lot on their hands, and they can only really just determine the best place for a child to stay. They don't really have time to deal with the emotional problems that come with being in a foster care system. As Christians, this is really, I think that our role as Christians in being called to care for the widow and the orphan, I really think this means that meeting the needs that can't be met by anyone else. These children have been through more things than we could imagine. And like I said, just giving a ride to school, helping at a local neighborhood sports camp, we can begin to develop relationships with these children and really show them what they truly need, which is the love of Christ. And I think that us as Christians, that we're the only people who can provide that kind of support.
Follow up, Catherine.
Do you, by any chance, know of any programs at the moment that help partner with CPS that are maybe conducted through churches that particularly
Yes.
could help people find an outlet for that?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm not sure if this is exactly partnered with any specific church, but there's a program called CASA, and they will go along with CPS workers and do exactly what I was just saying. They'll volunteer, and they'll go with the child from home to home, helping them with any problems they have, really just building that relationship with the child that the CPS caseworker can't really build. And then also another program is called Mission Impossible, and I've actually served at this organization. But what they do is they go to underdeveloped communities in Austin where there's a lot of children in the foster care system, and they just run a local neighborhood sports camp. And getting to build relationships with children during that time was it was amazing. It was just cool to see how appreciative they were of us, being just stepping in and helping with that. And so.
Crystal. You gotta give it a sec. Sometimes it has to warm up.
Okay. You touched on prevention, and so, for example, if we were to increase the number of investigators, as you proposed, given the fact that the majority of children are being removed due to neglect, if we had more investigators, how might that potentially decrease the number of children coming into care if the number of investigators increases when knowing that the majority of kids that are being removed, it's due to neglect?
Okay. So what I'm trying to, or what I was getting at with adding new investigators was not necessarily trying to reduce the amount of children being put into the foster care system. The main problem I wanted to address was with investigators was the amount of children being seen on time. That's their job, is to first go, and they're the first responders to report of abuse. And the problem with the high turnover rate in cases of investigators is they a lot of times weren't able to get to the scene on time before a child was abused, like Liliana. And so that's kind of what I was getting at with the investigators. However, and like I mentioned at the very end, I do think that there should be programs in the future that will help with neglect, will help parents better learn how to take care of their children. But right now, there are problems that, like I was saying, they're staring us right in the face. And before we can try to, stop the flow of children into the foster care system, we have to help the children that are in the foster care system right now.
Hi, great job. Thanks for inviting me. So I guess, you definitely spoke a lot about kind of the fiscal responsibility that this proposal would
Yes,
take
ma'am.
on. I was wondering if you really looked into or kind of dove into some of the supports and training for staff, CPS staff, if we were to bring on 1,100 additional.
Right.
And even not only that, in addition, but also what kinds of support and training are required now, and are there solutions that are there as well?
Yes, ma'am. So it was pretty hard to find research on how much it would actually cost to train a new employee, but I did allocate a little bit of that $50 million for training. So actually, if you do the math, hiring 1,100 caseworkers would only come out to $49,500,000. So I allocated that last $500,000 to training new employees. Just from data that I've seen in the past, like in 2016, it only cost $25 million to hire 550 caseworkers. And then also to what you're saying about what that training would involve, I know for one thing is that a lot of people who are hired, they either have a bachelor's or a master's degree, and a lot of them are required to have a year or more of experience. So I don't think the training would be completely extensive, but I'm sure it would involve each caseworker. They have like a supervisor who's a caseworker, and they are in charge of a certain amount of caseworkers in a region. I'm sure that would require training from them, teaching them how to deal with certain situations with children that they might not have in the past, and just how to best work efficiently. But to answer your question, I did allocate $500,000 to the training.
So JD, in your argument, you did a lot of comparisons between Delaware and Texas. Money goes into Delaware, and caseloads go down, and turnover goes down, the things that you were arguing for. Delaware is pretty different than Texas in terms of population size, which I'm sure has a huge ramification on these numbers. That it's not actually apples to apples.
Okay.
Have you looked at other bigger states, and are there states that have populations that are more comparable to Texas that are doing these kinds of programs and have seen those results that you are assuming are going to happen with the increased budget?
So I haven't actually looked at states with populations comparable to Texas, but what I did look at, and this is why I picked Delaware, is I looked at the ratio of children to children in the foster care system. So for Delaware and Texas, they're very, very similar, or they were at least in 1998. And so that's why I picked Delaware. I haven't actually looked at states with bigger populations, but like I said, this is a national problem. So a lot of other states are getting this wrong. I was just looking at the states who are getting it done the best, and that was Delaware.
Another one of a line of argument that you had was that an increased amount of people is going to deal with burnout. And you said the biggest reason for burnout was caseloads. I'm assuming not all caseloads or not all cases are created equally. I'm sure some are much more difficult than others.
Right.
And there are probably some that are the ones that stay with the worker that contribute to the burnout. So what's your response to my assertion that it may not just be that more people are going to deal with burnout, but that burnout is just going to be a natural part of the job? Whether we increase it or workers or not, we're still going to have a relatively high attrition rate.
Right. I think what you're saying is accurate. In Delaware, the attrition rate is still 11%, and in Jersey, which is one of the lowest for CPS employees, is 7%, and those are both still higher than the average jobs for America. But what I saw through the interviews with the CPS employees, and what they said is that the number one reason they were quitting was from high caseloads, and that's what you were saying. And I think that any way we can improve these turnover rates would be beneficial. And in 2016, the turnover rates actually dropped by an average of 7%. So it may not be that big of an improvement this time, but any improvement, in my opinion, will relieve some stress from these caseworkers. And even say you have one big case and 5 small cases, say you keep the big case, but then someone else comes in and takes the 3 smaller ones, that's still a lot off your table. And I think that just from recent studies back in 2016, we can see that the turnover rate actually did decrease.
Kind of a related follow-up question. So I know that in the research, it's new. There's some newer kind of ideas about acuity-based caseloads versus number-based caseloads. So all of the caseloads you mentioned really were number-based, right? Like 17 or 28, and we're talking about hitting these numbers.
Okay.
Acuity-based caseloads are, and kind of what Graham was getting to is this intensity. Did that come up in your research? Did you look at that? Is that an argument that was being made in this case or for CPS in general? Anything?
That is something I really did try to research, but most of my statistics come from the page for the Texas Child Protective Service, and so they didn't have that much information on how big the caseloads were, how small they were. But I do know that the supervisor for the caseworkers, they allocate the different caseloads or the different cases to each caseworker, and so I know that that's definitely something that would be taken into consideration. Obviously, 3 cases where a child has been in the foster care system and their parents are in no shape to take them back versus 3 children who might be back with their parents in the next 2 weeks. They're very different, but I know that there's already measures in place right now to make sure that they are distributed evenly. And so I think with if you have more caseworkers to hand out these cases to, I think that would improve things a lot.
So for those who might not be familiar with a caseload, so with a conservatorship worker,
Yes, ma'am.
What would that look like to have, just to put in context, 28 children on their caseload and what's required of them with each case?
So say a conservatorship worker has 28 caseloads, and in the span of about a month, they have to go visit every single child. The minimum is 1 time a month. It's ideally that they would visit them more. They have to, like I said, they have to participate in court hearings for every single child. They have to update every single family, and whether that's relatives or extended family, they have to update every single one of those people who play a part in that child's life. They have to update them with necessary information, and the whole time they're searching, they have to try to figure out what the best possible solution for this child would be. And one thing that I saw through a lot of the interviews is these caseworkers, they really, really care about these children. And so they take a lot of this on themselves. And like I said, it greatly impacts a child's entire future where they are placed. And so having 28 plus cases on a conservatorship worker's hands, as you can imagine, the emotional toll is unbearable. And that's why I think that by decreasing it from 28 to 22, that's 6 cases. It may not seem like a lot, but having to visit 22 children instead of 28 in a month, that would definitely relieve some stress, I believe. And I just think that as we continue to add more caseworkers, it'll continue to be improved.
Okay, one more question about the research, and then I'll stop with that. But I know that CPS offers stipends to social workers coming out of grad school that basically loan forgiveness type programs, and locks them in for, I can't remember if it's 2 or 5 years, but I just wondered if that came up in the research that you did, and if that has an effect on burnout, or if anyone's been looking at, does that change someone's kind of having this, being kind of beholden to this system, if that affects the level of burnout that they have.
Are you saying if they were to receive that stipend, that they were less likely?
Or like they would be required to stay for long stretches of time, regardless of kind of how comfortable they were. I didn't know if that just popped up.
I'm not that specific. That actually hasn't popped up in my research. One thing that I did find, I almost did my thesis, and I was going to say that the average salary should be increased. But one thing, a few states have tried that out, is if a caseworker is being paid more, then they're more likely to stay and not quit. And so I think that a stipend that would just purely economically, that would provide some incentive for the caseworker to continue working.
And so then, is the money allocated to CPS? Is that a line item on the state budget?
Sorry.
Is that a line item on the state budget? Like, is this I guess my question is, whose budget needs to be adjusted for this $50 million?
So it's yes, it's a state budget. CPS, it's a government-funded agency, and so I think it's then the state government's responsibility to set these budgets.
Okay. So then why, in your estimation and through your research, why has this not happened? $50 million, it's a lot of money, but for a state budget, it doesn't seem like it's an astronomical amount of money. Do you have any speculation as to why this has not been a priority?
I think that before 2016, this wasn't a priority because really there just wasn't a lot of awareness. The foster care system had been just a mess for so many years that a lot of people kind of threw it out as a lost cause. It wasn't until the case of Liliana in 2016 when it really grabbed the attention of a lot of people in Texas just because of how horrible it was and the 36 days that CPS hadn't visited. And so I think since 2016, there has been a lot more awareness raised. And like I said, Texas, they did make some efforts in 2016, adding the 550 caseworkers. And right now, I think it's the 86th Texas legislation is coming up. And this is one of the biggest things that they're going to be talking about. And adding caseworkers is actually one of them that they're going to be talking about.
So you mentioned 6,000 caseworkers. We've added 500. Did you research the number of increased children coming into care in comparison to the increase in caseworkers?
Overall, the amount of children coming into foster care it's at a slight increase. And so I think in 2015, it was about 28,000. 2016, when the caseworkers were added, it was about 29,000, and then now it's 30,000 children in the foster care. And there's some dips, but it's in Texas. As the population increases, it's on a steady incline. So, is there a follow-up question you had about that, or just?
So, in comparison to the number of increase in caseworkers, is there still proportionately more caseworkers, or did it kind of balance out with the increase in kids coming to care?
Right. Since it was just an increase of, about 1,000 children, adding 550 caseworkers, there might have been a little bit of balancing out, but the addition of the 550 caseworkers definitely helped. And one statistic that really sums it up is that in 2017, 1,000 more children reached permanency than the 2 years before, and I think that's a direct testament to the new addition of the caseworkers.
So, for someone who's unfamiliar with this, tell me if I'm wrong on this. So there is an investigator that somehow is made aware of a problem. Let's say that is a child that is going to be permanently removed from the family for whatever reasons, and is going to be linked up with a foster family. Is that kind of the chain of how things would work in a situation where they were going to be permanently removed?
Well, so sometimes, I'm not sure how many situations where immediately when the investigator takes them away from their home.
Yeah, not immediately.
Okay.
It's not. Yeah, maybe I'll ask a question and then. So my worry is that if we increase the amount of investigators, we're going to increase the amount of problems that we find. Now that's a good thing because we want to find these problems. There's situations that are going on, but I'm wondering if then we're going to have to also increase downstream from that. Some sort of initiatives to find enough foster families or enough places for these children to go if they do need to be removed. So, yes, we are increasing our ability for these investigators to see these families on a monthly basis. But if we don't take care of the problem downstream as well, then there's going to be some sort of backlog where we have a bunch of kids who can't go home because of how the investigators have. Do you understand my problem?
Yes, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
So it's really confusing, the distinction between investigators and conservatorship workers, but the people who visit once a month are the conservatorship workers. So the job of the investigator, like you were saying, whenever there's a report of abuse, so no matter what, they at some point have to go to that home. So whether it's in 24 hours like they're supposed to, or it's 36 days later, they have to at some point go to that home. So I don't think by adding new investigators, they're going to be finding new problems. It's not like they're going into new homes with different children who are being abused, but they would find the problems quicker than they are right now. And that's the main reason why I want to add investigators.
Catherine. Oh, sorry, we got a follow-up over here. Crystal, if you want to.
So given that add more investigators, they go in quicker, and they can assess what's going on. And then you also mentioned community organizations. And what would be your take on the prevention of children even being removed if we get investigators in sooner who can assess the situation and say this family needs this service that is available at this community organization? We could get them into treatment so that the children don't have to be removed.
Right.
And how that could even then, back to my preventative thing.
I think, so like I said, I really spent a long time trying to decide if I wanted to fix the problems that are putting children into the foster care system or actually fixing the foster care system. But I really do believe if that there was added investigators and we had a better hold on the foster care system that we have in place right now, then after that, we can then focus on, like I said, improving those community organizations that would help teach parents how to take care of their children, helping with drug and alcohol addiction. I think once the foster care system is at least in a better place, we can focus a lot more money then on the prevention thing, and which I think is ultimately where we need to be. But just right now, I think if we were to try to prevent that, it could be years before results are seen. And with investigators and conservatorship workers just drowning in caseloads, I don't think that would be the best solution.
All right, and that draws our night to a close. Thank you, JD.